2 years after the failed invasion, Earth had become a world that neither species could have imagined during those first terrible days of conquest. The morning sun rose over New York City, illuminating a skyline that blended human architecture with adapted Zephyrian structures, all integrated with living biological systems that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The city breathed with a rhythm that combined technology and life in ways that defied both civilization's original understanding. Dr. Sarah Mitchell walked through the halls of the Human Zephyrian Integration Council, her footsteps echoing in corridors where former enemies worked side by side to rebuild a world that belonged to both species. As the council's director, she oversaw settlements where Zephyrian survivors learned to live within Earth's ecosystem rather than trying to dominate it. The process was difficult, often painful, but ultimately transformative for both species. In ICE, the converted laboratory that had once been Vex Kalar's command center, engineer Paul Anderson collaborated with Keth Vala, a former Zephyrian technician who had chosen adaptation over death. Their hybrid technologies combined alien knowledge with Earth's biological principles, creating innovations that were more durable and adaptable than either civilization had achieved alone. The organic processing cores are exceeding all performance parameters, Keth Vala reported, his voice still carrying the distinctive hiss of his species but now tempered with something that sounded remarkably like human enthusiasm. Integration with Earth's biological systems has increased efficiency by 300%, while reducing power consumption to levels we thought impossible. Paul nodded as he examined the data flowing across screens that merged human interface, design with Zephyrian quantum displays. The hybrid computer systems they had developed were revolutionary, using living components to handle the chaotic inputs of Earth's environment while maintaining the precision of alien technology. Neither species could have created such systems alone. The most profound changes were visible in the person of the former sub-commander Thex Nalar, who now went by the human name Nathan. He stood before a mixed group of human and Zephyrian children in what had once been Central Park, teaching them mathematics using methods that combined both civilizations' educational approaches. His yellow eyes still marked him as alien, but his movements carried the relaxed posture of someone who had learned to live in harmony with his environment. The stars follow patterns that both our species discovered, Nathan explained to the aide, though young faces gathered around him, some human, some reptilian, all eager to learn. But we learned different parts of the same truth. Together, we can understand far more than either species could alone. Dr. Catherine Bell, now Earth's chief xenobiologist, published her groundbreaking research on planetary conquest through biological integration. Her work detailed how Earth had defeated the Zephyrians not through superior weapons, but by forcing them to become part of Earth's living system. The planet had conquered its would-be conquerors through the irresistible power of life to adapt, integrate, and transform everything it encountered. Traditional conquest assumes that victory means imposing your will on others, Catherine wrote in her landmark paper. Earth taught us that true conquest means changing your opponents so completely that they become willing participants in your system. The Zephyrians came to dominate Earth but found themselves dominated by Earth's principles of diversity, cooperation, and biological integration. The transformation was evident everywhere. In former London, Zephyrian atmospheric processors had been modified to work with Earth's weather systems, creating localized climate zones where both species could thrive. The alien technology that had once tried to sterilize Earth's environment now helped regulate and enhance the planet's natural processes. Captain Jake Morrison returned from a survey mission to the outer solar system, his ship powered by hybrid engines that combined human resourcefulness with Zephyrian efficiency. The vessel itself was a living example of the integration that had transformed both civilizations, its hull incorporating biological systems that could adapt to changing conditions while maintaining the durability of alien materials. The debris field from the Zephyrian fleet has been completely consumed by Earth's microbial systems, Jake reported to the Integration Council. Even in space, our planet's influence extends far beyond the atmosphere. The wreckage has become artificial reefs where Earth-based organisms thrive in conditions that should be impossible for life. Dr. Helen Wright ran medical facilities where human and Zephyrian physicians worked together to understand how both species' biology was changing in response to prolonged contact. The aliens who had survived the initial biological shock of Earth's environment were developing immune systems that could handle biological complexity, while humans were learning to incorporate beneficial aspects of Zephyrian cellular efficiency. "We're seeing evolutionary changes in both species," Helen explained to a gathering of international medical experts. "Humans are developing enhanced resistance to radiation and improved healing factors, while Zephyrians are gaining the ability to process complex organic compounds and resist biological contamination. Earth is changing us all." The children born after the integration represented something entirely new. Human children showed enhanced pattern recognition and mathematical abilities, traits they had acquired through exposure to Zephyrian educational methods. Young Zephyrians displayed unprecedented creativity and emotional intelligence, characteristics that had been almost absent from their species before contact with human culture. Nathan watched these children play together in parks where bioluminescent Zephyrian plants grew alongside earth flowers, their games combining human imagination with alien logic. The sight filled him with an emotion his species had never experienced before contact with Earth. Hope for a future that neither civilization could have achieved alone. "They will inherit a world that belongs fully to neither of our species," Nathan said to Dr. Mitchell as they observed the children. "Instead, they will inhabit a world that combines the best of both, where diversity is strength and adaptation is survival." Commander Rachel Thompson established the Earth Defense Network, a military organization that combined human strategic thinking with Zephyrian technological capabilities. The network used hybrid ships and weapon systems to patrol Earth's space, protecting the planet from potential future invasions, while maintaining peaceful contact with other civilizations they encountered. "Any species that approaches Earth now faces the same choice the Zephyrians did," Rachel explained to her mixed species command staff. "They can try to conquer through force and be absorbed by our planet's biological systems, or they can choose integration and become part of something greater than they were before." The Zephyrian Empire never learned what happened to their invasion fleet. Search expeditions sent to Earth's solar system found only empty space where their ships should have been, with no trace of the massive fleet that had simply vanished. The mystery created legends within the Empire about a small yellow star that could make entire armadas disappear, turning Earth into a forbidden zone that no Zephyrian vessel dared approach. But on Earth itself, former Zephyrian warriors had become gardeners, engineers, teachers, and artists. They contributed to a civilization that valued adaptation over domination, cooperation over conquest, and life over sterile perfection. The planet had indeed conquered them, but in doing so had given them something their empire never could: the freedom to become more than they had ever been. As the sun set over the integrated cities of Earth, bioluminescent structures began to glow with light that combined human engineering with alien biotechnology. The planet pulsed with the rhythm of two civilizations that had learned to live as one, a living testament to the power of a world that conquered not through force, but through the patient, transformative influence of life itself. Earth had taught both species the ultimate lesson of conquest. True victory came not from destroying your enemies, but from changing them so completely that they chose to become your allies. In trying to conquer Earth, the Zephyrians had found themselves conquered by something far more powerful than any weapon or technology: the irresistible force of life seeking to include rather than exclude, to integrate rather than dominate, and to transform rather than destroy. The stars looked down on a world that had proven conquest could be achieved through compassion, victory through integration, and strength through the courage to change. Earth had conquered the Zephyrians by making them better than they had ever been, and in doing so had become better than it had ever been as well. The global counteroffensive began at exactly midnight Greenwich time on the first anniversary of the invasion. In 12 time zones simultaneously, human resistance forces struck at Zephyrian installations using weapons that would have been impossible to create without a full year of studying how Earth's environment affected alien technology. Captain Stephen Miller led the assault on the main Zephyrian base in former New York, his team armed with bioweapons that fired encapsulated Earth bacteria in energy shells. The projectiles passed through alien shields as if they were made of air, striking Zephyrian equipment and causing immediate cascade failures. Systems that had functioned for months despite environmental stress suddenly shut down completely as concentrated microbial loads overwhelmed their filtration systems. "Target their power distribution nodes," Stephen ordered his team as they advanced through the outer perimeter of the base. The Zephyrian defenders raised their energy shields, but the human weapons simply ignored the barriers, delivering biological payloads directly to the shield generators themselves. Within minutes, the supposedly impenetrable defensive systems collapsed under microbial attack. In Europe, Commander Rachel Thompson's forces employed modified Zephyrian vehicles that had been captured and rebuilt using Earth-based organic computing components. The hybrid technology was more reliable than pure Zephyrian systems and completely immune to the electromagnetic interference that was crippling the invaders. Her tanks rolled through former London using alien energy weapons powered by biological fuel cells. "Their ground forces are in complete disarray," Rachel reported to the Global Command Network as her forces surrounded the European Zephyrian headquarters. "Equipment failures are cascading faster than they can respond. They're trying to retreat to defensive positions, but their transport vehicles are breaking down faster than they can be repaired." The most devastating phase of the counterattack came when Dr. Catherine Bell's team released their engineered microorganisms into the global atmosphere. The specially designed bacteria spread through air currents worldwide, programmed to seek out and colonize any Zephyrian technology they encountered. Within hours, reports came in from every continent of massive system failures in alien installations. Commander Vex Kalar watched his command displays go dark one by one as the bacterial assault reached his New York headquarters. The sterile environment that had protected his equipment for months was being overwhelmed by microscopic invaders that his filtration systems could not stop. Emergency power flickered on, then failed as the backup systems succumbed to the same biological attack. Sub-Commander Vex Kalar called out in the darkness, his voice carrying desperate authority. "Report status of our orbital fleet." TACOM. Response came through a failing communication system filled with static and interference. "Commander, all orbital vessels report critical system failures. Navigation is non-functional, weapon systems are offline, and life support is operating at minimal levels. Several ships have already begun uncontrolled descent toward the planet's surface." Dr. Marcus Johnson coordinated the technical aspects of the counteroffensive from a mobile command center that moved through the ruins of Washington, D.C. His team monitored Zephyrian communication frequencies, watching as their perfect coordination network collapsed under the combined assault of biological contamination and human cyber attacks. The aliens who had conquered Earth through superior organization were now unable to coordinate even basic defensive operations. "Their command structure is fragmenting," Marcus reported to Major Jennifer Adams in Greenland. "Individual units are making independent decisions because they can't communicate with higher authority. Some are trying to retreat, others are attempting to establish defensive perimeters, but there's no overall strategy anymore." In space above Earth, the Zephyrian fleet was dying. Ships that had crossed the galaxy without difficulty now struggled to maintain basic life support as Earth's microbial assault reached every system. The exotic materials that made their hulls nearly indestructible were being consumed by bacteria that had learned to metabolize alien alloys, creating structural failures that propagated through entire vessels. Captain Jake Morrison, now serving as liaison between ground forces and the International Space Station crew that had survived in hidden facilities, watched through telescopes as Zephyrian ships began falling from orbit. The massive vessels that had terrorized Earth during their arrival now tumbled helplessly through the atmosphere, their crews trapped aboard dying technology. "This is Alpha Station to all ground units," Jake transmitted. "Confirm visual on multiple Zephyrian vessels in uncontrolled descent. Impact predictions show crashes in Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. Repeat, the invasion fleet is falling." Sub-Commander Vex Kalar found himself commanding what remained of Zephyrian ground forces, as communication with Vex Kalar's headquarters was completely lost. His own equipment was failing rapidly, forcing him to make decisions no Zephyrian commander had ever faced. How to survive on a hostile world without the technology that defined their civilization. All units establish perimeters around supply depots. Techsnal are ordered through failing communication channels. Conserve power, maintain essential systems only, and prepare for extended operations without orbital support. But the supply depots were already compromised. Danny Cooper's mountain forces had coordinated with urban resistance cells to target every major Zephyrian supply installation simultaneously. Using bioweapons and modified alien equipment, they systematically destroyed the stockpiles that kept the occupying forces fed and supplied. They're completely cut off now, Danny reported as his team demolished the last Zephyrian supply facility in North America. No supplies from space, no communication with their fleet, and no way to maintain their equipment. They're stranded here with technology that's breaking down faster than they can fix it. Dr. Helen Wright observed the final phase of Zephyrian collapse from a field hospital established in Central Park. The alien soldiers being brought in by their own forces were suffering from conditions that their medical technology could not address. Earth's microbial environment had overwhelmed their immune systems not with disease but with biological complexity that their sterile bodies could not process. They're going into biological shock, Helen explained to her human medical team as they prepared to offer aid to former enemies. Their systems evolved in completely sterile environments, and exposure to Earth's biological diversity is causing systematic failure of their cellular processes. Without immediate adaptation therapy, they'll die within days. The final surrender came not through formal negotiation, but through simple biological necessity. Vex Kalar, trapped in his darkened command center with failing life support, faced a choice no Zephyrian commander had ever confronted: adapt to Earth's conditions or die with his technology. His proud warrior culture had prepared him for honorable death in battle, but not for the humiliation of biological defeat. Amanda Kim and Dr. Ryan Clark worked frantically to develop life support systems that could keep Zephyrian soldiers alive in Earth's environment. Their hybrid technology, combining alien knowledge with Earth's biological processes, became the bridge between two incompatible ways of existence. Zephyrian survivors faced the choice of accepting human help or dying alongside their failing machines. We're offering them modified life support systems, Amanda reported to the Resistance Command, but they have to accept biological components in their technology, and that means abandoning everything they believe about sterile superiority. Some are accepting our help, others are choosing to die rather than compromise their technological purity. Commander Rachel Thompson established the first prisoner camps for surrendering Zephyrian forces, but these were unlike any military detention facilities in human history. The aliens required constant technological support to survive in Earth's environment, making them completely dependent on their former enemies for basic life support. The conquerors had become refugees on the world they had sought to dominate. As the second year of what had been an invasion began, the situation had completely reversed. Earth's cities were being rebuilt by humans using hybrid technology that combined the best of both civilizations. Zephyrian survivors worked alongside their former enemies, not as conquered subjects but as fellow inhabitants of a world that had taught both species the difference between conquest and adaptation. The Zephyrian Empire never received word from their invasion fleet. As far as they knew, Earth had simply made 200 ships and their crews vanish without trace, creating a mystery that would make their small yellow star a forbidden zone for generations. The Empire's greatest military force had been defeated, not by superior weapons but by the patient, inexorable power of life itself. 6 months after the invasion began, Vex Kalar could barely recognize his once mighty force. The Zephyrian soldiers who had landed as perfect warriors now moved like exhausted laborers, constantly maintaining equipment that should have functioned flawlessly for decades. Their plasma weapons fired with reduced power, their armor showed visible corrosion, and their vehicles broke down with disturbing frequency. Dr. Helen Wright had been studying the occupying forces from hiding places throughout the city, documenting the physical changes in Zephyrian soldiers. The former epidemiologist from Johns Hopkins had noticed that the aliens were developing what appeared to be chronic fatigue syndrome, their movements becoming slower and their reaction times declining. Most fascinating was their increasing need for rest periods that had not existed during the initial invasion. The breakthrough in understanding came when Helen managed to analyze biological samples from abandoned Zephyrian equipment. Earth's microbial life was not just colonizing alien technology. It was attempting to establish symbiotic relationships with Zephyrian biology. The aliens' immune systems, perfectly adapted to sterile environments, were being overwhelmed not by disease but by the sheer diversity of Earth's microscopic ecosystem. In Nevada, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Brooks led a successful raid on a Zephyrian supply depot that revealed the extent of their logistical crisis. The aliens' food processing systems were failing to convert Earth's organic materials into acceptable nutrition. Their perfect recycling technology, designed for sterile worlds, could not handle the complex organic compounds that made up Earth's biosphere. The invaders were slowly starving on a planet abundant with life. "They can't eat anything from our world," Peter reported to the Resistance Command Network. "Their systems keep rejecting Earth proteins, their water purification can't handle our mineral content, and their air recyclers are clogged with organic particles they can't process. They're completely dependent on supplies from space, and those supply runs are becoming less reliable every week." The orbital supply situation was indeed deteriorating rapidly. Zephyrian ships in Earth orbit were experiencing cascading system failures as Earth's magnetic field and atmospheric radiation slowly overwhelmed their shielding. The exotic materials that made their hulls nearly indestructible in space were proving vulnerable to the complex electromagnetic environment of a living world. In Tokyo, engineer Amanda Kim worked alongside physicist Dr. Ryan Clark. In a hidden laboratory, reverse engineering captured Zephyrian technology. Their discovery would change the course of human resistance. Alien equipment contaminated with Earth microorganisms could be repaired and modified using biological components. The sterile perfection that made Zephyrian technology superior also made it adaptable to Earth-based modifications. "Look at this," Amanda whispered as she showed Ryan her latest creation. She had successfully merged a damaged Zephyrian power cell with Earth-based organic computing elements, creating a hybrid device that was more reliable than either technology alone. Their quantum processors actually work better when they have biological components to handle the chaotic inputs from our environment. The first human weapons capable of penetrating Zephyrian shields emerged from these underground laboratories. By exploiting the microscopic contamination that was destroying alien equipment, human engineers created projectiles that carried Earth bacteria directly into alien systems, causing immediate failures in their defensive technology. Danny Cooper's Mountain Resistance Group became the first to field test these bioweapons during an ambush on a Zephyrian patrol. The modified ammunition passed through alien energy shields as if they were not there, the biological components confusing the shield generators into treating them as environmental particles rather than weapons. 3 Zephyrian soldiers fell to human guns for the first time since the invasion began. Sub-Commander Thex Nalar found himself questioning everything he had believed about Zephyrian superiority as he watched his forces struggle with basic operations that should have been effortless. The humans had not developed superweapons or discovered advanced technology. They had simply learned to weaponize their own planet's natural processes against the invaders. "Commander," Thex Nalar reported to Vex Kalar during their daily briefing, "our combat effectiveness has declined by 60%. Equipment failure rates exceed anything in Imperial records. Our soldiers require twice the standard rest periods, and medical reports show conditions that our doctors cannot identify or treat. I must recommend immediate withdrawal from this world." Vex Kalar's yellow eyes burned with frustrated rage. The Zephyrian Empire had never retreated from any world, never admitted defeat to a primitive species. Yet the evidence was undeniable. His forces were being systematically defeated, not by superior military strategy but by the planet itself. Dr. Catherine Bell's team in Antarctica had made the most significant discovery of all. They had successfully created engineered microorganisms that were harmless to Earth life, but catastrophic to Zephyrian technology. These specially designed bacteria could be released into the atmosphere, where they would spread globally and accelerate the breakdown of alien systems. "We can end this invasion," Catherine explained to Major Jennifer Adams during a coded transmission to the Greenland Command Center. But releasing these organisms is irreversible. Every piece of Zephyrian technology on Earth will become non-functional within weeks. There will be no going back. The decision to deploy Catherine's biological weapon came after reports from around the world confirmed that human resistance was reaching a tipping point. In London, Sophie Davies had successfully infected the main Zephyrian communication hub with a computer virus that spread through their entire planetary network. In Colorado, Danny's forces had captured an entire alien outpost using biomodified weapons. In Asia, Africa, and South America, resistance groups were achieving similar victories as alien equipment continued to fail. Commander Rachel Thompson, leading European resistance forces, coordinated with teams worldwide to time the release of Catherine's engineered microorganisms with simultaneous attacks on major Zephyrian installations. The plan was ambitious. A global counteroffensive that would exploit every weakness the occupiers had developed during their months of exposure to Earth's hostile environment. The night before the counterattack, Vex Kalar stood on the observation deck of his command center, looking out over a New York City that no longer seemed conquered. Human activity continued in the shadows. Resistance networks operated with increasing boldness, and his own forces struggled to maintain basic security. The city lights that still functioned seemed to mock the Zephyrian presence, a reminder that Earth had never truly submitted to imperial rule. Captain Jake Morrison recently escaped from detention during a prisoner transport breakdown caused by vehicle failure, made his way through the city to link up with local resistance cells. He carried with him intelligence gathered during months of captivity, detailed information about Zephyrian weaknesses, equipment failure patterns, and most importantly, evidence that the aliens' orbital fleet was on the verge of complete collapse. "Their ships are dying," Jake reported to the resistance leadership. "I've seen their maintenance logs, heard their communications. Earth's electromagnetic field is slowly cooking their electronics. Our atmospheric pressure is causing hull stress they never designed for, and the radiation from our sun is breaking down their hull materials in ways they don't understand. They're trapped here as much as we are." Dr. Marcus Johnson, also recently freed during the same transport failure that allowed Jake to escape, brought even more disturbing news about Zephyrian capabilities. Their weapons are operating at 30% efficiency. Their armor has developed microscopic fractures that spread daily, and their soldiers are showing signs of what can only be described as Earth-induced immune system confusion. They're not just failing technically, they're failing biologically. As the one-year anniversary of the invasion approached, the situation had completely reversed from Vex Kalar's original expectations. Instead of ruling over a conquered world, he found himself commanding a deteriorating force trapped on a hostile planet that seemed determined to consume his technology and exhaust his soldiers. The humans had learned to fight using Earth itself as their greatest weapon. The countdown to the global counteroffensive began as resistance cells worldwide prepared to strike simultaneously. Earth had spent a full year teaching the Zephyrians that conquest was not simply a matter of superior technology. Some victories could only be achieved by learning to live in harmony with the world you sought to control, a lesson the sterile empire was incapable of understanding until it was far too late. The first Zephyrian landing craft descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls glowing from friction with air that their sensors had analyzed but never truly understood. Vex Kalar stood in the command pod of his personal assault ship, watching the primitive human cities grow larger on his screens. New York sprawled below them, millions of humans scurrying through streets like insects fleeing light. The plasma cannons fired first, sending beams of superheated energy into the heart of Manhattan. Buildings that had stood for decades dissolved into vapor while human aircraft fell from the sky like broken toys. The Zephyrian warriors moved with mechanical precision, their energy shields deflecting desperate human gunfire while their weapons carved through tanks and concrete barriers, as if they were made of paper. General Robert Kane watched the carnage from his command bunker deep beneath the Pentagon. Every screen showed the same story repeating in London, Beijing, and Sydney. Human technology was completely outmatched, their most advanced weapons barely scratching the alien armor while cities burned under precise alien fire. Within 6 hours, Every major military installation on 4 continents had fallen to Zephyrian forces. Vex Kalar established his command center in what remained of the United Nations building, the symbolism not lost on either species. Human leaders were brought before him in chains, their faces showing the fear and desperation he had seen on a dozen conquered worlds. President Hayes stood straighter than the others, meeting the alien commander's yellow gaze without flinching. "Your resistance was admirable but futile," Vex Kalar hissed, his universal translator converting his words into perfect English. "Your species will serve the Empire as laborers and resource gatherers. Comply with imperial law and you will be permitted to continue existing." But even as he spoke the words of conquest he had used many times before, Vex Kalar noticed something troubling. The environmental readings from his armor were showing anomalies. The atmosphere contained far more organic compounds than his sensors had detected from space, and his equipment was working harder than normal to maintain optimal conditions. 3 days into the occupation, the first equipment failures began. Zephyrian warrior Kex Thule was patrolling Central Park when his helmet display started flickering. The atmospheric filters were clogging faster than designed, requiring constant cleaning that his automated systems should have handled easily. His plasma weapon showed decreased efficiency, and his communication device crackled with static that made no sense. Dr. Marcus Johnson sat in a detention facility in what used to be Columbia University, surrounded by other captured scientists and military personnel. The former MIT physicist had been studying the alien equipment whenever guards brought prisoners through areas where Zephyrian technology was visible. What he observed defied everything he knew about their supposed technological superiority. "Their suits are failing," he whispered to the captured Air Force colonel sitting beside him. "Look at how often they clean their equipment, how they keep adjusting settings that should be automatic. Something in our environment is affecting their technology." The Zephyrian soldiers began requiring longer rest periods, their perfect efficiency declining as days passed. Their commanders attributed this to the stress of occupation duty, but the truth was more disturbing. Earth's atmosphere, filled with organic particles, electromagnetic interference from countless living systems, and the chaotic energy patterns of a biologically active world, was slowly overwhelming their sterile technology. In the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, former Army Ranger Danny Cooper led a small group of survivors who had escaped the initial assault. They observed Zephyrian patrols from hidden positions, noting how the alien night vision equipment seemed to struggle in Earth-specific light spectrum. The aurora borealis caused visible distress to alien optical systems, and even ordinary moonlight seemed to create interference patterns on their displays. Danny's group made their first successful attack on a Zephyrian supply convoy traveling through a mountain pass. Using captured human weapons and exploiting the aliens' declining equipment reliability, they managed to destroy 2 transport vehicles before disappearing back into the wilderness. The victory was small, but it proved the invaders were not invincible. In EQ, London computer programmer Sophie Davies worked in an underground resistance cell, trying to understand the alien computer systems from fragments of captured equipment. Her breakthrough came when she realized that Zephyrian quantum processors, despite their advanced design, operated on principles that made them vulnerable to Earth-based computer viruses. The sterile perfection of their systems had no defense against the chaotic, adaptive nature of human-designed malware. The first successful cyber attack on Zephyrian systems brought down a communication relay in Paris, creating a 6-hour gap in their planetary coordination network. The aliens quickly restored the system, but the incident sent shockwaves through their command structure. No species had ever successfully interfered with Zephyrian technology, and the implications terrified them. Dr. Catherine Bell had managed to escape the initial assault on government facilities and now worked with an international team of scientists hidden in an abandoned research station in Antarctica. The extreme cold and isolation protected them from immediate discovery, while they studied samples of alien technology recovered by resistance fighters. What they discovered changed everything. The Zephyrian materials were indeed advanced, but they were also completely sterile. Their manufacturing process eliminated every trace of biological contamination, creating technology that functioned perfectly in the vacuum of space or on sterile worlds. However, Earth's environment was anything but sterile. Billions of microorganisms filled every cubic inch of air, water, and soil, creating a biological soup that alien technology had never encountered. Catherine watched through a microscope as Earth bacteria began colonizing fragments of Zephyrian hull material. The microorganisms found ways to metabolize exotic alloys, creating waste products that interfered with the material's structural integrity. What had been indestructible armor was slowly becoming brittle and unreliable. Sub-Commander Thex Nalar reported these equipment failures to Vex Kalar with growing concern. Weapons that should maintain peak efficiency for years were losing power after weeks. Environmental suits required constant maintenance that their automated systems could not provide. Most disturbing of all, the soldiers themselves were showing signs of fatigue and illness that Zephyrian medicine could not explain. The humans are using biological weapons, Thex Nalar suggested during a command briefing. Their atmosphere is contaminated with organisms designed to attack our technology. But Vex Kalar knew better. The Zephyrian sensors would have detected any intentional biological weapons. What they faced was something far more insidious. Earth itself was fighting back. The planet's natural biological systems, evolved over billions of years to break down and recycle everything, were treating Zephyrian technology like any other organic material to be decomposed and consumed. In medical facilities converted to treat occupying forces, Zephyrian doctors struggled with conditions they had never seen. Soldiers complained of respiratory problems despite perfect atmospheric filters, skin irritations despite impermeable armor, and digestive issues despite sterilized food supplies. Earth's microscopic life was finding ways past every defense, not to kill, but simply to exist in the same space as the alien occupiers. The resistance networks began coordinating through Major Jennifer Adams, operating from a hidden command center carved into the Greenland ice sheet. Reports came in from every continent. Alien equipment was failing at accelerating rates, their soldiers were weakening, and most importantly, their supply lines from space were becoming unreliable as orbiting ships suffered the same mysterious degradation. Captain Jake Morrison, captured during the assault on the International Space Station, was held in a detention facility in former Washington, D.C. From his cell window, he could see Zephyrian guards struggling with equipment that malfunctioned daily. Their perfect formation, marching had become irregular as individual soldiers dealt with failing systems. The invincible army that had conquered Earth in days was visibly deteriorating after just months of exposure to the planet's environment. Vex Kalar stood in his command center, watching status reports that told an impossible story. His mighty invasion fleet was being defeated not by human weapons or strategy, but by microscopic life forms and environmental conditions that his species had never encountered. For the first time in his military career, he began to consider that the Zephyrian Empire might have finally found a world it could not successfully conquer. The humans had not surrendered. They had not been broken by superior force, and somehow their primitive planet was turning the Empire's greatest strength into a fatal weakness. Earth was teaching the Zephyrians a lesson that would reshape their understanding of conquest itself. The darkness of space rippled like water as 200 massive ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Each vessel stretched for miles, their dark metal hulls gleaming with alien symbols that no human had ever seen. Inside the command ship, Commander Vex Kalar stood 8 feet tall on powerful legs, his reptilian skin a deep green that shifted to black in the dim light of his bridge. His yellow eyes studied the small blue planet that hung in the distance like a jewel against the void. "Scan the third planet," Vex Kalar ordered, his voice a low hiss that carried the authority of someone who had conquered 12 worlds for the Zephyrian Empire. His clawed hands gripped the command console as data flowed across holographic displays. The information confirmed what their long-range scouts had reported: a primitive world with basic technology, divided into competing nations, perfect for conquest and resource extraction. On Earth, Dr. Catherine Bell was working the night shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station in Nevada when her instruments detected something impossible. The massive energy signatures that appeared on her screens defied explanation. She ran the scans 3 times before accepting what she saw. A fleet of unknown objects had just entered the solar system. Her hands trembled as she reached for the emergency communication device. Within hours, every major government on Earth received the same terrifying message. President William Hayes sat in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by military advisors and scientists. The large screen displayed Catherine's data while she explained what her equipment had detected. General Robert Kane leaned forward, his weathered face grim as he studied the projected size of the alien fleet. "How long do we have?" Hayes asked, though he already feared the answer. "At their current speed, maybe 72 hours before they reach Earth orbit," Catherine replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was reporting. Admiral Lisa Torres pulled up naval deployment charts, while Air Force General Patricia Stone began calculating what little resistance Earth's military could offer. The numbers were not encouraging. Even with every nation's combined forces, humanity had never faced anything like this. Meanwhile, aboard his flagship, Vex Kalar reviewed intelligence gathered from Earth's broadcast signals. The humans seemed to spend most of their time watching entertainment, arguing about politics and engaging in what the Zephyrian computer translated as sports. They fought among themselves constantly, wasted resources on art and music, and showed disturbing emotional attachments to other species they called pets. Everything about human culture confirmed Zephyrian assumptions about primitive mammals. Sub-Commander Thex Nalar, Vex Kalar called to his second-in-command, a smaller but equally dangerous Zephyrian warrior. "What is your assessment of this species?" "Weak, Commander," Thex Nalar replied, his own yellow eyes studying the data streams from Earth. "They have barely achieved spaceflight. Their weapons are chemical-based projectiles, and they waste enormous energy on non-essential activities. Their emotional nature will make them panic when faced with superior force. I estimate complete surrender within 1 planetary rotation." Vex Kalar nodded with satisfaction. The Zephyrian Empire had perfected conquest through technological superiority and psychological warfare. Their energy weapons could slice through any known material, their shields could deflect nuclear weapons, and their ships moved faster than anything the humans possessed. More importantly, their sterile technology was immune to biological weapons, their armor was impenetrable, and their soldiers felt no fear or hesitation in battle. On Earth, emergency meetings took place in every capital. The United Nations called an unprecedented session while military leaders worldwide began mobilizing forces they knew would be inadequate. In Moscow, Beijing, London, and Washington, leaders faced the same terrible reality. Humanity was about to face an enemy they could not defeat through conventional means. Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet from the International Space Station, using telescopes to observe ships that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. The vessels moved in perfect formation, their hulls reflecting no light, making them visible only as dark shapes against the stars. What disturbed Jake most was how effortlessly they traveled, as if the vast distances of space meant nothing to their technology. Dr. Catherine Bell worked frantically with an international team of scientists to learn everything possible about the approaching fleet. Her instruments detected energy patterns unlike anything in human experience, materials that seemed to absorb electromagnetic radiation, and propulsion systems that operated on principles beyond current human understanding. Yet something nagged at her scientific mind, a pattern in the data that seemed oddly familiar. The alien transmission came exactly 72 hours after their arrival in Earth's solar system. Every television, radio, and communication device on Earth received the same message simultaneously. Vex Kalar's image appeared on screens worldwide, his reptilian features and glowing yellow eyes causing panic in every major city. "Humans of Earth." The translation software converted his hissing voice into dozens of languages. "I am Commander Vex Kalar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your planet has been selected for incorporation into our domain. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. Your governments will transfer all authority to Zephyrian control. Your military forces will disarm completely. Your population will submit to imperial law." Compliance will result in your survival as a subject species. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your world. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving Earth in chaos. Some nations called for immediate surrender while others prepared for hopeless war. Religious leaders proclaimed the end times while scientists desperately searched for weaknesses in alien technology. In the streets, people gathered in crowds, some praying, others rioting, most simply staring at the sky in disbelief. President Hayes addressed the nation that evening, flanked by military leaders and allied representatives. His words were broadcast globally as he announced the formation of the Earth Defense Coalition, uniting every nation under a single command structure for the first time in human history. The speech was brave, defiant, and utterly realistic about humanity's chances. But, in her laboratory in Nevada, Catherine Bell made a discovery that would change everything. The electromagnetic patterns she had detected from the alien fleet were not just unfamiliar, they were unstable. The ships were struggling with something in Earth's environment, fighting constant interference that their perfect technology could not quite overcome. The patterns reminded her of biological systems under stress, as if the sterile alien technology was being affected by Earth's chaotic electromagnetic field and the complex radiation signature of a living world. As the 72-hour deadline approached, Vex Kalar prepared his invasion force with complete confidence. His warriors had never faced a species that could match Zephyrian technology, and these emotional mammals would be the easiest conquest yet. He had no way of knowing that Earth had already begun fighting back in ways his sterile empire could never understand or predict.